boys and girls. This is Mike, your host at Craft Beer Storm, which, believe it or not, is the #1 beer podcast on iTunes. Can you believe this? If you look at food category, it's number 12 of all food podcasts in the universe, I guess, right? We're number 12. We're right there. And we're #1 in beer podcasts. This is freaking awesome. But it's all because of you guys, and we love getting the content out there. But listen, this week we have Audra Gaiziunas. She's from Brewed From Her Ledger. She does accounting, finance, and operations strategy for the beer industry. So she's a CPA. She's helped me with some business plans that I've had and advice. She knows what she's doing. She's been to a lot of breweries around the United States. I think over 150 if you look at her website. A lot of knowledge. So I invited her on. I think she's going to be great. But we had a great conversation. So let's get to it. And we're here with Audra Gaiziunas. She is the owner of Brewed For Her Ledger. Accounting, finance, and operations strategy for the beer industry. How you doing, Audra?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I know you because you helped me out with one of my business plans, which is still out there. But it's hard to put stuff together. But I was trying to put a brewery in Massachusetts, and things didn't go. I mean, they started out well, but it's still out there. Hey, if anybody in Massachusetts wants to start a brewery with our beer, let's do it. Get a brew pub going. And then actually, I did a podcast with Ryan Newhouse, and that was episode. That was a previous episode, episode 20, where we talked about the beer marketing and tourism conference in Boise, Idaho. In late March, and I saw your name on it, and I'm like, I know Audra. And then one thing led to another, and I got to get out there. I love the whole agenda is awesome. Like you meet all these brewers, you get tastings, you go to breweries, dinners, and then you go skiing in the end. I mean, that's freaking great. I got to figure that out. I don't know.
Yeah, my talk is going to be on the value of partnerships between breweries and beer tourism operators. So when you have towns that have brewery tours that are offered, usually it's like a van or multiple series of vans or a bus that they take you to 3 or 4 different breweries and give you the history on that. I'm going to be talking on the value and how the partnership can be strengthened between a brewery and a tour operator. And then I'm also going to lead a roundtable, a best practices roundtable for brewery owners, really any business owner, talk about best practices in finance and accounting as it specifically pertains to us in the craft beer industry. So I'm pretty stoked about that. I like to branch out in marketing when I can, just because I like to bring analytics and numbers into what is traditionally more of a fuzzy part of the business. So I like to bring the hard numbers to it, and get to influence people that way. Influence the marketers through accounting and numbers.
Well, a lot of people, and what that's why I wanted to bring you on too, is try to enforce the fact to people who think they want to open a brewery and it's all great, and it's a business, I mean, you got to know what you're doing, and you got to focus on the right things, and you can't just go out and say, hey, I got $100,000. Let me spend $20,000 on a van and put our logo on it because it's cool. Like, you don't do that. You don't do that. You figure out if you really need the van, what are you going to use the van for? Is it just going to sit around? Are you going to deliver something? Or should you be delivering anything? That's another thing. But I also was your guest speaker at the University of Vermont Business of Craft Beer certificate program, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I loved having you on it, and I really appreciated your insights that you were able to bring to the class.
No, I mean, no, that's no problem. I wanted to just, kind of the real world, before you get into it, this is what I've experienced. And it's not just like a straight linear line upwards and you're just going to sell loads of beer. there's just all kinds of factors, and the first thing I told them, I said, look, if you do a budget, double it. Just double it right off the bat, because that's going to be closer to what you're going to be spending in terms of build out and issues that come up. And I guess they appreciated that. So.
That's one of the startup tracks that we had. That's an 8-week course that is craft brewery finance and accounting. I co-teach that with Maria Pierman out of Oregon. She's out with Radix Accounting in Portland. And we split the class in 4 and 4 each. And I teach the startup portion of it because that is primarily my client base. I work with probably about 75 to 80% of my business is startups. And I'm working on coast to coast and figuring out, creating, vetting business plans, creating pro formas, vetting the pro formas that are out there, and just making sure that they're ready to open and operate well capitalized, not undercapitalized, which is our number one issue that we have in the industry. That's the biggest problem we have, So it was great to have you on in the class just because you're a former CPA and can speak that language and really emphasize the importance of not opening undercapitalized and making sure that you do budget enough and you ask for a big enough loan. That's a huge problem. And I noticed that was a gap that existed. I was the CFO of Mother Earth during this time when I decided to go out on my own. I was the CFO there for 3 years, and prior to that, I was at Dogfish head as their controller. And I noticed that nobody was really fighting for the little guy. Nobody was really helping them along, and they can't afford to have a CFO or a CPA that is specifically working in beer for them full time. They just can't afford it. But there was nobody there to just give them a leg up. So I decided to start Brewed For Her Ledger to serve those small breweries, the ones that are not the New Belgians, not the New Hollands, the ones that can afford to have controllers and full-time accountants. These are the breweries that produce 1,000 barrels or less, especially in their first year. So providing them a lot of strategic guidance and vetting the numbers to make sure that when they open, they weren't going to run into trouble right away. And you can see now, 3-5 years, after all these many breweries are open, we're over 7,000 breweries now. Some are running into financial troubles right now. And that has typically been existing since they're open. They've just been trying to figure out how to rob Peter for Paul, so to speak. They've been undercapitalized since the beginning, and they've just been able to operate with their head barely above water. And in that 3 to 5 year mark, that's when things really start to catch up. And so that's where you see a lot of the closings happening now.
Yeah, about the capitalization. I mean, it never seems to be enough money when you start out. It's just you have to make sure that you're funded well. And that 3 to 5 year time frame, that's just a rocky road. I mean, we're in year 4. And still, like we talked before the call, I'm still pivoting to try to figure out, okay, where am I going with this business? We've tried different, when I started back 4 years ago, like we were talking about, the 22-ounce bottles were very popular. I'm like, I can do this. I can make money doing this. This is cool. And then you get into the 20. I got a distributor who was making 60 cases a week. You put them in a corner. They would take them away. And then the 22-ounce bottles fell out of favor, and everybody wanted cans. So I'm like, all right, well, I guess I got to pivot now. No one's buying these bottles. Let's do some cans. So we started doing the cans, and it was great. We were getting into some really large chain stores, like we were in Hannaford. We're in the Whole Foods network. So I'm like, this is cool. We got cans, but I'm looking at the cost of it, and the cost is just, we're not making any money doing these cans. So I've just, pivoted again, and now we're going to go towards, sixtels, just get those out there. Actually, I just got a voicemail yesterday from a local restaurant here in Portsmouth, a Bratskeller. So we made a Bratskeller ale for them. So yeah, they're going to put it on tap, on their menu. So that's cool. That's going to generate some solid, consistent income, which is stuff like that. You just got to figure it out, how can I make some money? I love brewing. I love doing it. Like you say about the CPA, but it's a business, you can't just, can't just go out, yeah, dude, let's just throw some hops in. It'll sell, no problem, you know. Like everybody else is throwing hops in it too. Like what makes you different?
Well, hope is not a strategy. Numbers are where it all is and where it comes together. Then that's the importance you have to look at. And I'm like you in that I love to brew too. When I worked at Dogfish, that's Sam Calagione is the one who inspired me to start brewing. He was my boss. He worked desks with me. And just listening to him tell his story about how, you know, they experimented with this cherry beer, or how this keg exploded from going into secondary fermentation from the cranberries, or there was just all these different stories that he had. And he's this incredible English major and a really great speaker. I had to start homebrewing. It just was enough for me to say, you know what, I should do this. I love science, I love math, and I also love art. And being able to blend all of that together, I decided to start homebrewing in 2009. So I speak the language of the brewer as well as the accounting language with my accounting background. Very similar to you, Michael, that, you know, it's a combination of both. And when you have the strength of the brewing side and getting that down along with the numbers, you can make magic. But it's a constant like Rubik's Cube, because you look like you're about to finish this puzzle and there's one thing off. And you're like, okay, can I stick with that? No, I can't. I got to pivot. I got to change this about my model. Or, you know, for us here in the Southeast, a lot of what we're doing is crowler based. People are getting crowler machines. So that's going along with the can trend, but then you can take a lot of these beers that are brewed on the brew pub side and be able to take them home with you. That's been really popular, and that's a pretty decent investment as well. It's only, you know, a little over $2,000 for most crowler machines, and they've been selling really well for us at Brewery, where I'm currently the CEO in Nashville. Yeah,
so you're in North Carolina, right?
Yes, I'm in Nashville. I'm in the mountains. I've lived in North Carolina since, 2003. Yeah, 2003. So I've been here for 15 years and absolutely love it. I went to grad school here. I went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for my master's degree in business administration. I was working as a CFO for an architectural design firm then. And when I graduated, I was hired by Caterpillar and as their work tools accounting manager and pricing consultant. And that was the one and only corporate job I ever had. It lasted a year and a half, and I got into Dogfish almost immediately after that. So I've been in beer for a decade now, and I finally found the industry that I can call my home, and I absolutely love it, and I'm grateful to be able to work in it every single day.
Were you at Dogfish Head? Was that you?
Yeah, that was me. I was the controller there. Yep.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's how I remember. Yeah.
Numbers nerd.
Do you know Sam? We got to get Sam on the podcast here.
Yeah, that would be a good one. Or Mariah. His wife Mariah is also a great speaker, and she's super. Yeah, I love that brew.
All right, we got to talk after this. We got to figure it out. Try to get him. I sent him a random email, but I don't even know if he got it. I don't even know if I just like Sam at Dogfish Head.
And, you know, that man, I'm sure, gets inundated with a whole bunch of mail every single day. So it's hard.
It is, yeah. But we'll get him. We'll get him. So that's cool. So, yeah, I guess, or I guess we're the same. It's just like, you know, I can't sit in a cube, you know, like this brewing is great because it's just I can kind of experiment and just follow the passion and create something, right? When you're a CPA or an auditor, you create a spreadsheet, you know, the auditors that come in are happy and then they put it away. Like beer, people come in, you make beer, they have a flight and they're like, you know what? All these, I haven't found one beer that I don't like. I love all of them. And that stuff like makes your world, you know? So that's kind of what that's it, you know, and I still have to do the CPA stuff and the audit stuff to bring some income in. But I just told you before, our podcast is ranked number 12 in the food category in all of iTunes. I am so pumped about that. That's unbelievable.
I love it. That's awesome.
Isn't that's freaking awesome? And I love my listeners out there and guys who are downloading, and I'm psyched. But so I guess that's your story. You just got passionate. You started brewing. Did you ever commercial brew, or you just did?
No, I've done some collaborations within some of the clients that I work with, and let's see, I did a 3-barrel batch. I'm 100% Lithuanian, and nobody's really brewed a Lithuanian beer. And yeah, because not many people are fluent in the language, but it has this amazing beer culture out in Eastern Europe that has been largely unexplored because people don't speak the language. Only 9 million of us in the world speak it. Very few are going to be involved in beer. So that's been a challenge. But Michael Jackson went there, the acclaimed writer, may he rest in peace, and he had a really interesting blog post and a couple of series of blog posts that he had written based on the beer culture of Lithuania. So the head brewer, Les and I, from Trophy Brewing in Raleigh, we sat down together and created a recipe that was a red smoked pea lager. Pea as in the peas. I had to get Polish peas. I couldn't find Lithuanian peas, but put those in the mash, and we created a beer, a Lithuanian lager, that was modeled after Michael Jackson's description of what he had tasted over there.
Peas,
yeah. And then we had
awesome.
My grandma's recipe of dumpling. They're called koldunai. In most parts of the world, people know them as pierogies, but we call them koldunai. We had a recipe that my grandmother had put together, and so we duplicated that and made that out of the tap room and released the red pea lager the day that we offered it with these little dumplings. So that was probably the biggest one that I've done as a 3-barrel. Most of the time I work on a 1-barrel at Brewery Brewing, where I'm the CEO right now in Asheville. The head brewer Gary and I have created a few beers together. We've done a black walnut sweet stout that we added.
Yummy.
Yeah. I added candy cap mushrooms to them. And the candy cap mushrooms impart the aroma of maple syrup without adding any sort of fermentable to it. So it doesn't mess with your recipe. It doesn't mess with your gravity at all, but it still gives you that aroma of maple syrup without you adding actual maple syrup. I thought that was brilliant. And I learned that from a Base Camp Brewing, from Justin at Base Camp Brewing out on the West Coast and outside of Portland. He did that with their Eagle Cap lager, and it was amazing to have this lager. Like, where did this maple syrup come from? He goes, mushrooms. What? Mushrooms? Sure enough. So I ordered some, and we made a black walnut sweet stout with candy cap mushrooms and called it breakfast for dinner. And then we've also brewed a Belgian blonde that had bananas, peanut butter, and candied bacon.
Oh, man.
It was, yeah. After Elvis, it was the TCB, the Taking Care of Business, the crew, of course, is what we named it after. So couldn't call it Belgian Elvis. Somebody had already done that.
Oh.
But, and then there was a lingonberry kvass. So there we had some Lithuanian yeast smuggled in from Lithuania, and I was able to get my hands on it from a friend of mine that's also a brewer. He's got his own brewery up in Weaverville called Zebulon. He saved a little bit for me, and so we propped that up, homebrewed with it, and then I brought some into Brewery. So we made a lingonberry pancake kvass out of that beer, out of that yeast. So that actually had true, authentic Lithuanian yeast in it, and it's 6 different varieties of Saccharomyces that have been bundled together, and it's a hybrid lager ale yeast. It's crazy. It's very crisp and clean.
Wow.
But it's unique. It's very unique. So this is the stuff that I love getting involved with when I'm not spreadsheeting, because they're conversation starters. Not at the end of the day, you and I don't want to be in front of our computers all the time. We like to engage with people. We like to be out there, and we're like the atypical accountants that should have been marketers or salespeople. But we ended up being accountants because we're good with numbers.
I guess, right? I don't know. Like Audra, you're like my hero. You're like Brewing. You're like the CPA. You're like awesome. Like this is what I want. I mean, I have the knowledge. I have the CPA knowledge and the audit,
Right.
and try to spend money wisely and not just spend it on junk. But you also want to get out there, like you said. And I know a lot of accountants or auditors that are listening. They understand what we're talking about. It's like when you approach people, they're like, "All right, what do you want?" But and then when beer's involved, it just relaxes everything, and it's awesome. Yeah.
It's such a great conversation starter because you're going to have a story that goes behind it, whether it's how you made it, where a part of it came from, where you were inspired by the recipe. There's just always a conversation piece that can be wrapped around any beer really that you are involved in either making or selling. That's a big part of why I love this industry so much.
It does. It brings people together, which is fantastic, and communities, and there's just so much benefit from it. And we started the podcast to try to kind of educate people on craft beer, because it's just, that's one of the reasons why I went in, is I just go into these stores and it's 90% of this big beer, watery stuff, suitcase for $13, 24 cans. I'm like, oh my God. And I don't see the craft, local craft beer in there, or they just get a really small section. Or if you go into a restaurant, there's like 10 taps and 9 of them are this watered down beer or crafty beer. And like one of them are maybe a local beer, probably a regional beer, not even really local. So that kind of annoys me. So that's one of the reasons why we started this podcast as well. But what do you think about, you've added ingredients in beer. What do you think about the value of adding local ingredients in beer?
That's a huge factor in giving back to the local economy. And it's great when you can partner with somebody that is making, because it's really imparting the essence of the soil of that particular region. So for us in Asheville, we work a lot with Riverbend Malt House, that they are here. They just opened their second facility. They couldn't keep up with their demand, which is great for those guys. I love Brent and Brian. They're awesome folks. And they, it's having Appalachian created malt that adds another dimension to the story. It's not necessarily going to be the cheapest, but it's going to be unique, and you're adding back to the local community. And at Brewery, we brewed this beer called Painted Fortune, and we use local corn. So there's a farmer, Michael Fortune, who creates a lot of different products, whether food products that go into our meals or beers. But he grows a specific heirloom corn for us called Painted Fortune. It's got purple nodules in it, which is really cool, little kernels. But it's a specific variety of corn that he brews, or that he grows just for us, that we brew with. So we get to partner with the local farmers that way as well, whether it's donating our spent grain for their cattle, feed, pigs, or having them grow ingredients for us that we can then add into the beer. We get to pay them, and they get to grow new, interesting products. And it's just another way to be able to support the local economy. I think it's huge value.
It's the circle of life, right? You just described it. They grow something, we use it, beer, spent grain, goes back to the animals. It just gets recycled.
It does, and it gives you a sense of place. It gives a beer a true sense of place. This was brewed with Appalachian malt and experimental hops that had been grown off the side of a mountain, and raspberries, or herbs like basil had been grown by this local farmer. Each one of these suppliers has their own stories that they can weave into the beer as well. And it just gives you a real sense of place and regionalization of these different products that you can create, that you can say are truly your own. This is truly Appalachian beer. This is truly a Northeastern beer. This is a Poconos beer. This is a Floridian beer, all the Florida vices that are out there. Florida has got their like really cool beer scene going on now too, with all their fruited Berliners that they do, and lots of tropical stuff. But they've come into their own in offering that out there that other breweries are now trying to mimic as well. So it's really cool when you see the local suppliers, farmers, maltsters, hop growers really getting into that and creating something brand new that nobody can really truly replicate, because you can't replicate the soil composition from one part of the country to the other very easily. Can't do that with the water either. So it gives you just a real sense of uniqueness while you're being able to offer money back into the local economy. I love it. I always find a great value of adding local ingredients whenever possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And we do the same thing here. I mean, you're talking about the soil and not replicate. I mean, we use Irish barley in all our beer as the base. I've started at home, and you know what? All these beers are coming out really good. And I think I got to attribute it to that. It's not me, I don't think. Well, it's me to some extent, but I think, you have that rich barley. I mean, that's how I got the idea. I was in Ireland. I'm eating this Irish bread. I'm like, why doesn't he make a good Irish beer like in the U.S.? I mean, I just don't think the Irish beers here are not. I mean, they're okay. Some of them are just like colored water. It's just not really. They shouldn't be calling them an Irish beer or give it an Irish tone out. But we like to infuse local ingredients like honey. There's a guy down the street from me. He has honeybees, CB honey, and he gives us honey for our honey brown. Which does well in competitions, actually. And then we have maple syrup, which we have a maple wheat, so we infuse it in that. And we even use there's a local buffalo wing place here. We use their buffalo wing sauce, and we infuse it in our pale ale. And we call it buffalo, and people love it. It's crazy. They love the heat. It's not over the top hot, but it's just enough they're like, wow. It's kind of different, right. But it is local.
There, just reminding you.
Oh man, but so what do you see? I mean, you met a lot of brewers, and you've seen a lot of beer businesses. What are the challenges you see in craft beer business today?
Well, with the overall industry, it's evolving as it always does. You do see a lot of beers on the shelves, a lot. Going into distribution just in general has become a lot tougher. Not only are you really working with the wholesaler, they're supposed to be your partner, but they have so many new SKUs to manage now that there's less of it, that there's less shelf space and less tap handles that are out there for the taking, so to speak. And it's the challenge of if you've already grown yourself to a significant size, how do you maintain that market share? How do you maintain that shelf space? Because typically you have a higher fixed overhead that you have to be able to support if you've gotten into the regional status or larger. So it's maintaining relevance more than anything right now and nowadays. Like, why a beer that you would have had 5 years ago that is a staple, there's a lot of people, especially the ones that are just coming into age to be able to drink craft beer, they want what's new and shiny. They want the newest brewery. They want the newest style. So these tried and true beers, that these milk stouts, these pale ales that we've had over the years now are sort of becoming less relevant, and you have to be able to maintain yourself within the eyesight of these new craft beer drinkers. So you're seeing us shift a lot into hyper local markets, and people, what I'm working with, most of the startups that I work with now, and that has evolved so much over the 6 years that I've been out on my own, is I work a lot with taproom models. So that making them sustainable from, at 1,000 barrels. And they're not going to be large, and they're okay with that. It's just making them be able to make enough money that they can keep their doors open and continue to reinvest back in the brewery.
Yeah.
So the challenge really is maintaining relevancy and also authenticity. I've seen that issue arise a few times too. The people that are behind some of these beers are not who they say that they are, and being able to call them out and doing that in a fashion that doesn't, I don't know, necessarily offend. You just don't want to run into legal problems, but if you don't have an authentic face out there, if you're not really sharing your true story, I think you're going to run in trouble too. People will start dropping your brand because they want to know the brewer. They want to know the people that are who's behind that brewery and why they're behind it. You just can't make up reasons anymore. The beer quality is not just having beer quality is not good enough anymore. You need to have a compelling story that goes along with it, and better heck is be authentic.
Absolutely. And I think given the explosion of social media, including this podcast, right? People want authentic. They don't want, fake. They want to know what's behind the beer, what's behind the business, are there real people behind it? And I think there's just a big, a huge shift. And you could see it from, not that they're fake or anything, like the larger breweries, like, for example, they have awesome beer, Green Flash. Like they were, they went, they just had a mission and they were going to be in all the states, and they produced their beer and got it out. And and it's excellent beer. But it's just kind of, where is Green Flash? And a lot of local people are like, well, I have this local brewery right here. Why do I need to drink Green Flash? I have my local IPA, so I'm going to support them. And it hurt Green Flash. They pulled out of 33 states. Then they closed the Virginia plant, the new Virginia brewery that they were going to, Virginia Beach Brewery. I don't think they even brewed there, right? I'm not sure.
No, it was pretty much, they were there for a year, and then New Realm bought them out.
New Realm was there, yeah. Mitch Steele. I've been emailing with Mitch. I'm going to have him on the podcast too in January. He told me, leave me alone for 6 weeks and talk to me in January. So hopefully, but he's a good guy. He's a great guy. But so they bought that, and then the next story that came out from them is like they got took over by VCs. It was so Green Flash was like the president, the guy who started it. I don't know what his capacity is now, but you see, it's just this trending towards the hyper local, which is I guess is good for the communities, And that's the way it was, I guess. Well, that's the way it is in Germany. I had somebody from Germany on, and he's like, Mike, there's just not one Oktoberfest. There's like every city has one. like every town has their own Oktoberfest. And, it's like kind of throughout the year. I'm like, really? I'm like, wow. So that's the way it is there. And it used to be here pre-Prohibition. I mean, every town, there were 3,000 breweries before Prohibition, plus the population was much less at that time. So the per capita was probably like, we're not even close to it, maybe, because we only have 7,000 breweries in the U.S.
We still have a ways to go. I think there was an article that you can search for that Bart Wasson had authored on the Brewers Association website. This is probably about 3 years ago now, that talked about per capita and talking about the beer bubble and whether is there one? Are we going towards market saturation? Are we there yet? And he drew all these historic figures from other countries and compared it to us, to where we are, and we were still nowhere near the saturation point versus other countries even today. So that's a 3-year-old article. Obviously, we've had a lot more breweries open since then, but that's a good perspective to put in, that you'd have to look at it more from the per capita side, but also compare it to other countries in the world that consume beer. And if they can make it work, and they're much smaller countries than ours, then why we should be able to do that as well. And it's the hyperlocal thing. Lithuania, this tiny country, that has 3 million people in it. A village of 500 people will have 20 micropubs. They'll have 20 different places to drink beer that have been created there in a town of 500. It's super hyperlocal, and they share their own yeast. So every town has their own yeast strain, and they create their own beers off of that, and it gives them a sense of place of their town, even within a small Baltic country of Lithuania. That I can see that working. It does work because it gives people pride in their communities, because it's something that represents them.
Right. And I think, well, you're talking about the tap room. I mean, that's where the margin is, like if you can create a
Right.
model like that and get people to come in and drink, I fill a glass with beer, you drink the beer, you give me the glass back, I wash it, fill it again, it's very, like there's not a lot of cost in it. And so the margin is much better, and that supports the brewery. So I think that's the most excellent model. And then, the local communities just drive people into the brewery and just support them. I mean, I think that's great. And I was, one of the other questions I was going to ask you is about a craft beer bubble. And I think you don't think we're near a bubble, or what do you think in terms of the industry, how it is now? I see breweries around me. I mean, they're starting to close for different reasons. One brewery had a restaurant in it, and I think they said that they weren't really restaurateurs, but they were brewers, and then the food changed and it changed different times, and it was kind of challenging, and they ended up closing the whole thing. And now I think they just scaled all the way back again. They had like a 7-barrel system. There was another brewery near us that closed as well. They started after me, and they're already closed. It's unfortunate. The guys are awesome, but they did the canning thing, and they just produced a lot of beer. But the system wasn't really a large system, and I guess they just couldn't keep up with it. And then the cost of doing business and cash flow, it'll kill you.
Right. Absolutely.
So, yeah.
Well, so you asked, like, is there still room for growth? Yes, there definitely is. As long as you continue to offer the consumer, your beer drinker, your fan, a new experience and a new product, there's definitely still room for growth. If your goal is to become a regional powerhouse that's selling 15,000 barrels, it's going to be a lot more challenging to do that just because of the limited shelf space and tap handles that are out there. But if you want to open your own tap room and do some of your own limited distribution, there's definitely still room for growth, because you can look at a city like San Diego and see how many breweries that they have. Like one's within every 3.5 miles. Every person is within 3.5 miles of a brewery. And that, to me, is incredible. And there's a lot of other places in the U.S. that we just haven't reached that. Part of it may be the culture, but part of it is also the West Coast is so much more developed than a lot of us are on the East Coast or the Midwest. So there's definitely still room for growth. You just have to offer something new and different and a real story. If you are just going to open a tap room that has a basic pale, a basic stout, a basic porter, that's not anything new. A lot of people have already done that. So you have to have a concept that goes along with it that puts a twist on it and makes it new and exciting and different. The breweries that I've seen that close are, for the most part, they've overextended themselves. They invested too much in their infrastructure early on. So they went in for overcapitalized on what they thought that they were going to be doing, with this hope is a strategy kind of mentality, and they just got in over their heads with too much debt, and it crushed them. They didn't do a full analysis. They should have been a lot more conservative when it came to capacity and adding capacity into the current production. Yeah. Restaurant is a completely different business than a brewery. Those are two distinctly different businesses. And if you're going to go into a brew pub model and have a restaurant that's attached to it, you better have a general manager that has restaurant experience.
Oh, yeah.
We're not going to be able to do that.
You have to have a restaurateur. I mean, it's very easy to sink the ship if you don't know what you're doing in terms of a restaurant or food. I really don't want to do food, but I'm kind of forced to do food in New Hampshire, like some paninis and stuff like that and chicken fingers, because I want to do pints. So they have like a Nano Plus license here. But I mean, a restaurant, I would never open a restaurant unless I had a restaurateur involved, and then he knew what he was doing.
Completely different model, completely different overhead burden, and it's a distinct line of business. At Brumari, we just keep them as separate lines of business. We combine them on the financials, but I make sure that we can break down the profitability by the business line in how I had designed the chart of accounts. So the restaurant has its own P&L within the larger P&L.
Yeah.
And the has its own P&L, and then the bar has its own P&L because we also do spirits and a lot of blended drinks with cocktails and beer, like cocktails and beer tails and alcoholic slushies. So there's a lot of room for creativity behind the bar. So that needs to be gauged separately as well. So we have 3 distinct business lines within one business unit that is just a brew pub.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense because then you know where the deficiencies are and you can correct them instead of lumping everything together. You just keep it linear. Okay, that's because it is. A restaurant's a separate thing. Brewery's a separate thing.
Yeah.
And then you even have one for the bar. It's awesome. But yeah, it's just very important to look at the numbers, look at what you're doing monthly, strategy. If it's not working, you got to pivot. Try to get as much people as you can into the tap room, which is the best thing. It's great for the community too. And then like craft beer trends. I mean, what do you see out there in terms of styles, like beer styles? And I mean, you've been to a lot of breweries and you've seen a lot of like what's happening, what's selling these days in tap rooms. Is it still IPAs or?
Yeah, IPA. I mean, IPA is king. People love the hazy pales and the hazy IPAs. There's some people that are they have shied away from the West Coast style. They don't want to be hit in the face with a lot of hops, but they still want it to be in the aroma. They want a soft finish. And for them to go back to a West Coast style versus a Northeast style is difficult. You see that. It's the hazy and the soft pales and the IPAs. Fruited Berliner Weisses, lots of fruit-injected Berliners. That's a big one. Lots of there's new pastry stouts and milkshake IPAs. Those are 2 others. Milkshake IPAs being that you add lactose in there so that it creates a mouthfeel and more of like a smoothie flavor and then texture when you drink the beer. Pastry stouts, like I mentioned as well. Twist on traditional styles. So not just having a Kolsch. You can have a Kolsch, but then you also have a tangerine Kolsch or a mandarin. Twist on traditional styles. That's what I'm seeing.
Wow.
And yeah, so there's a lot that's going on in there, and it's pretty exciting. It's nice to go to a brewery that can make a clean classic style as well as the off the wall style. So that's what I'm really looking for too. Saisons have kind of like faded away for a while.
Saisons.
Yeah, they're my favorite style to brew too, which is a bummer, but I love that yeast. It's so much fun to work with. There's so much versatility with the Saison yeast. So, but I don't see them as much anymore. Fruited Berliners and milkshake IPAs and pastry stouts, those are the trends right now. And of course that's going to change. It always does change.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, that's what I see as well. The aroma and the taste for IPAs. They don't want some bitter bomb. Yeah, everybody's gravitating towards that. So, yeah, well, listen, we're really getting into this, and I really appreciate you coming on. You have a lot of knowledge. And is there anything you can leave our listeners with, like in terms of why they should be drinking local? Like some final thoughts.
Other than supporting the local economy, you are drinking with your community more than anything when you are drinking local. That to me is really important, and know that you're not just supporting the brewer when you drink local, you also support the local farmer and the local maltster. It goes beyond just the brewer when you are keeping your dollars and your drinks local.
Yes, very well said. Encapsulated. It's just supporting your community. You live here, and I've kind of bounced around the world. I mean, I've been all over the place. I lived in England. We lived in Sweden for like 6 months and traveled to, Germany and, lived in New York for a little bit and finally settled down up here in New England. And just to find the community, I think it makes a lot of sense, and try to support your local businesses. It's just, create something that makes sense, right?
Right, because if you don't, then everything becomes homogenous, and you start to lose your sense of place in who you are and where you come from. It just becomes a homogenous mess. So keep it groovy and eclectic and weird, and drink local.
Weird is good, yes. We're two weird CPAs. Oh my God! All right, so I appreciate you being on, Audra. It's awesome. I want to see you at these conferences. I haven't met you yet, but I've talked to you for a number of times. But we'll probably I'm going to try this media pass thing at the Craft Brewers Conference, Brewer Association. If you're listening, I'm going to call you. I have a podcast. Hey, we're number 19, dude, in the food category. That's worldwide. So could be galaxy wide, right? I don't know. We're trying to rule the planet here with our podcast, and we're getting there, number 12. So, listen, Audra, I appreciate you being on. You've given us a lot of knowledge, a lot of things to think about, and I wish you well in your business. And if anybody needs your assistance, how can they get in touch with you?
Well, my company is Brewed For Her Ledger. It has its own website, brewedforherledger.com. You can always just do a Google search for beer and Audra, Audra, my name. I usually come up in the first page because there's that many Audras that work in beer. But I'm also Beer Mudder, BeerMudder, Audra, on Instagram and Twitter. I don't use Twitter as much, but on Instagram I have a lot of stories, and just you get glimpses of who I am, but it also connects you back to my company, Brewed For Her Ledger. So, or come visit us in Nashville. I live in Nashville. Come visit.
That's cool. Is that like the Tough Mudder thing?
Yes, I used to be in Tough Mudder and Spartan. I did the Spartan trifecta adventure races.
Yikes.
Yes.
Holy cow. I haven't done that stuff. I did the marathon like we talked about. I mean, that's the most extreme thing I've done, which it's, 0.5% of the people on the planet have ran a marathon. So it's pretty cool. But I got to try to explore that Spartan stuff. It's like heavy duty. But I appreciate you being on, Audra, and thanks for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. And take care.
All right, you too. Cheers.
Yeah, that was Audra Gaiziunas. She's from Brewed From Her Ledger. She has a lot of knowledge on accounting for breweries. That's the key, man. It's a business. You don't go out there, it's cool. Yeah, let's make some beer, throw some hops in, and be awesome. It's a business. You got to have strategy. You have to make sure you channel the funds that you get to the right things. Can't just go out and buy a van, say, hey, yeah, it's cool, man. We'll just keep it in the driveway. You can't do that stuff. You got to, be rational, and it's a business, and cash is king, man. And breweries, cash flow could sink you very quickly. So she gives a lot of advice on that, and I would highly recommend her. She's Brewed From Her Ledger. You can search it on Google. And reach out to her if you're starting a brewery, or if you have ideas to expand your brewery. She's the woman to go to. She's helped a lot of people, a lot of knowledge. So if you guys like this podcast that we're doing, and you like what we're putting out there at the time of the recording, as I said in the beginning, we're the number one beer podcast on iTunes. I see in the food category we're number 12 overall for food podcasts, which is so cool. And I think we're the number one beer podcast. So there you go, which is an honor. So if you like our stuff, please go to iTunes, subscribe, leave us a rating, leave us a review. That's the only way we get up in the rankings, and we've done it, man. It's so cool. But, go tell a friend. There's still a lot of work we need to do. We got to get our numbers up, get this podcast out to everybody who drinks beer, and just to let them know that there is an alternative to this watered-down, mass-produced beer. It is local, delicious craft beer. So get out there, help me out, and I will see you guys next time. Take care.